Mira walked into the school building with quiet steps. She held a small notebook in her hand and wore plain clothes, an old sweater and long skirt. Her hair was tied back simply, and she didn't wear any makeup or jewelry. She looked like someone who didn't want to be noticed, and that was true. Mira never liked attention. She was there as a substitute music teacher. The regular music teacher had fallen sick, and the school needed someone to fill in. Mira said yes without thinking too much. She liked music, and she liked helping students. But she didn't expect anything special to happen. When she arrived at the music room, a group of teenagers were already waiting. Some were chatting loudly, some looked bored, and a few were playing simple tunes on the piano. No one paid attention when Mira entered. One boy even said under his breath, "Another boring sub." The assistant teacher, who had been keeping the class busy in the main teacher's absence, came up to her. He looked Mira up and down and said, "Well, I hope you can keep them from sleeping." Mira smiled politely and nodded. She walked slowly toward the piano and looked at the messy sheet music on the stand. It was a difficult classical piece, fast, technical, emotional. She gently straightened the pages and asked softly, "Is this what they're practicing for the state recital?" Assistant teacher shrugged. "Yeah, but none of them can play it right. We've been going over it for days. They don't get it." One of the students, a girl with bright red nails and a tired face, rolled her eyes. "It's too hard," she said. "Why can't we just play something easier?" "'Cause we're not here to play nursery rhymes," the assistant teacher snapped. Then he turned to Mira and said, "Maybe you can show them how it's done." His voice had a hint of sarcasm. Didn't really believe she could do it. The students laughed quietly. One boy whispered, "She probably only knows how to play Twinkle Twinkle." Mira didn't say anything. She didn't get angry or shy. She just walked over to the piano bench and sat down. Her fingers touched the keys lightly, as if she was greeting old friends. There was a small silence in the room. Someone coughed. Then Mira began to play. At first, the students were still joking and whispering, but then something changed. Mira's fingers moved with ease and grace, her hands dancing across the keys like they belonged there. The sound that filled the room was deep, emotional, beautiful. The notes weren't just correct, they had feeling, power, warmth. The music spoke. It's like it was telling a story. Even the assistant teacher froze. The students stared, eyes wide. One girl slowly sat down, forgetting her phone in her hand. Nobody laughed now. Mira kept playing, calm and focused, like she was alone in the room. But she wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just ... playing, like someone who truly loved the music. When the final note came, it hung in the air for a moment before fading. No one moved. Then someone said, very softly, "Whoa." The assistant teacher cleared his throat. "Where did you learn to do that?" Mira gave a small smile. "I've played for a long time," the boy near the back mumbled. "She's like a piano master or something." But Mira didn't explain more. She just stood up, gently pushed the bench back in place, and said, "Let's begin class." From that moment on, the room felt different. The students didn't joke anymore. They looked at Mira with new eyes. And though she didn't say much, everyone started to realize this quiet woman might not be so plain after all. The next day, Mira arrived at the music room early. The hallways were still quiet. She liked that. She sat at the piano alone, lightly pressing a few keys, just enough to hear their sound. Her eyes stayed on the sheet music from yesterday, the same piece the students had struggled with. The door creaked open, and a few students peeked inside. They didn't rush in like before. Instead, they walked in slowly, their eyes on Mira. Some gave her polite nods, others looked curious. Something had changed. One of the boys sat near the front and whispered to the girl beside him, "Do you think she's famous or something?" The assistant teacher arrived soon after, looking a bit more serious than the day before. He gave Mira a quick nod and said, "All right, let's continue where we left off." The students picked up their sheet music. Mira stood beside the piano, watching them quietly. She tried to play again, but the same mistakes kept happening. Wrong keys, missed timing, no emotion. Most of them were just trying to survive the piece, not understand it. Mira stepped forward gently. She didn't raise her voice. "Let's slow it down," she said. "One section at a time." The assistant teacher folded his arms, clearly frustrated. "We've been doing that. It's not helping." Mira didn't argue. She simply walked over to a girl who looked nervous and said, "May I sit with you?" The girl nodded and scooted over. Mira played just 4 bars of the song, slowly, carefully, showing the girl each finger movement. Then she asked, "What are you thinking when you play this part?" The girl blinked. "I don't know. I'm just trying to hit the right notes." "That's the problem," Mira said gently. "Music is more than notes. Think of a feeling. Sadness. Hope. Then try again." The girl did. The difference was small, but it was there. A little more flow, a little more feeling. Mira nodded. Better the class watched in silence. One by one, Mira moved around the room, helping each student, not just with their hands, but with how they felt. "Don't rush," she told one. "Boy, breathe with the music," she told another. Even the assistant teacher grew quiet. He leaned against the wall, arms still crossed. But he didn't interrupt anymore. Near the end of class, a tall boy raised his hand. "Can you play it again?" he asked. Mira looked at the clock, then at the piano. She sat down without a word. Once more, her fingers found the keys, and the room filled with music. The students didn't talk. They didn't fidget. They just listened. This time, Mira didn't play the full piece. She stopped halfway and turned to them. "This part," she said softly, "is where the song is asking something. You don't answer with force. You answer with feeling. You respond with your heart." One of the boys nodded slowly. "I never thought of it that way." When the bell rang, no one moved right away. They packed their things slowly, still thinking. About what they heard as they left, one girl looked back and said, "Thanks, miss." The assistant teacher stayed behind. He cleared his throat again, just like the day before. "You're good with them," he said. It was awkward, but honest. Mira smiled, just a little. They just needed to listen to the music instead of fighting it. He nodded, then left the room. Mira sat alone again, placing the sheet music back in order. Her hands rested on the keys, not playing, just feeling their cool surface. In her heart, something quiet began to open. She had played for herself for many years, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to play for others again. The news spread quickly. By the 3rd day, even students who weren't in the music class had heard about the new substitute teacher who played like a professional. Some didn't believe it, others were curious. A few even peeked through the window just to get a look at her, but Mira stayed the same. Quiet, simple, focused. She walked into class, helped students, and spoke only when needed. She never talked about her past or showed off, but everyone knew something was different about her. They just didn't know what. That morning, the assistant teacher was late. Mira was already in the room when the students arrived. One of the boys, bold but polite, asked, "Can we hear you play again?" Mira looked at the clock. "We'll have time at the end. Let's practice first." No one argued. They were paying attention now. Even the ones who used to stare at their phones were listening when she spoke. They followed her instructions. Carefully, they wanted to learn. During the lesson, Mira helped a quiet boy who always sat in the back. He had trouble keeping rhythm and was often ignored. But Mira sat beside him patiently, counting with him, repeating parts over and over without losing her calm. For the first time, the boy smiled. "I got it," he said softly. Mira nodded. "Yes, you did." The others noticed. They started helping each other, giving advice, sharing tips. The classroom didn't feel tense anymore. It felt like a team. Later, as promised, Mira played again. This time she chose a slower, emotional part of the piece. Her fingers moved gently, like the piano was part of her body. The room was silent. Even the student sitting by the window leaned in to listen. When she finished, there was no loud applause. Just a deep silence filled with something heavy respect. One of the students whispered, "She should be on stage, not here, after class." A girl named Lonnie, who had been watching closely for days, stayed behind. She waited until everyone left, then walked up to Mira with a curious look on her face. "You're not just a teacher, are you?" she asked. Mira looked at her, but didn't answer right away. Lonnie continued, "I searched your name online. I hope that's okay." Mira gave a soft sigh, not angry, just quiet. "I saw the videos," Lonnie said. "You were amazing. You played at concerts. You won competitions." Mira nodded slowly. "That was a long time ago, but why did you stop?" Lonnie asked. Mira paused. Her fingers lightly touched the top of the piano, not playing, just feeling. "Life happened," she said. "Things changed. I lost people I loved. After that, music didn't feel the same anymore." Lonnie stood quietly. She didn't ask more questions. Mira turned to her. "Sometimes when your world falls apart, even the things you love become heavy." Lonnie nodded. "But you're playing." Again, Mira smiled gently. "Yes, a little. Maybe that means something is healing." That small moment passed between them, like a shared secret. After school, Mira walked home with her bag in one hand and sheet music in the other. The sun was low in the sky, birds sang in the trees. For years, she had hidden her talent, her story, her pain. She thought silence was the safest place. But now, with each passing day, she felt something opening again. Not just in her fingers, but in her heart. She wasn't sure where it would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid. The next week brought more changes. Students no longer walked into the music room with sleepy eyes or lazy steps. They came early, carried their sheet music carefully, and some even practiced during lunch breaks. Something had shifted inside them. They wanted to get better not just for the grade, but because Mira made them feel like it mattered. Mira watched them quietly. She didn't give long speeches or try to impress anyone. She just did what she had always done, listened, guided, and played when needed. Her presence made the classroom feel safe. Her calm voice and patient eyes made students try harder. One day, during practice, the assistant teacher asked, "Why don't you lead today's full rehearsal?" Mira nodded simply and took over. Each student was asked to play a small section of the recital piece, one by one. Mira stood nearby, giving tips after each part. Sometimes a soft correction, sometimes just a smile. She didn't embarrass anyone, even when they made mistakes. She treated everyone with respect, and because of that, they respected her back. Later that day, during a short break, one student quietly came up to her with his phone. "I showed your old video to my parents," he said, almost shy. "Said you played like someone from a movie." Mira gave a soft laugh. "It was a long time ago. Do you miss it?" he asked. She paused. "Sometimes, but I think I needed to step away to understand why I loved it in the first place." He nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling the weight of her words. The assistant teacher, who had been mostly silent these days, finally asked her directly, "After class, why didn't you tell anyone about your past? You could have been teaching at a music academy or playing in big halls." Mira looked down at the keys before answering. "Because music became too heavy after I lost my family. I couldn't play without feeling pain." There was silence. Then she added softly, "But now, when I see these students trying, learning, feeling the music, it helps. It reminds me why I started in the first place." The assistant teacher didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and walked away. That evening, while Mira was walking home through the quiet streets, she passed by a small community center. From inside, she heard the faint sound of piano notes, simple, slow, but full of heart. She stopped and listened. A child was practicing inside, struggling with a simple melody. Mira smiled and kept walking. Memories came back as she walked, the sound of her mother humming while Mira practiced. The proud look on her father's face after her first concert, the quiet mornings filled with piano music at home. For years, she had locked those memories away. but now they didn't hurt as much. They felt warm again. Back in her small apartment, Mira sat at her own piano. It was old but well cared for. She placed her hands on the keys and played softly. Not for anyone else. It's just for herself. In that moment, she wasn't a substitute teacher. She wasn't the woman who had disappeared from the music world. She was simply someone who loved the piano. And for the first time in many years, that was enough. By the time the recital was just 2 weeks away, students were practicing harder than ever. Some stayed after school. Others came early in the morning, just to get a few extra minutes on the piano. The classroom felt different now, full of energy, effort, quiet determination. Mira continued guiding them, never raising her voice, never showing off. She corrected mistakes gently and praised real effort, even if the result wasn't perfect. She never made anyone feel small. That's why the students trusted her so much. One boy who always kept to himself had struggled since the beginning. He never spoke much and often looked nervous when asked to play. But Mira noticed how serious he was, how hard he tried, even when his hands shook. She spent extra time with him, working on his confidence more than just the notes. One afternoon, when only a few students remained after class, she sat beside him at the piano and asked, "What do you feel when you play this piece?" He stayed quiet for a moment, then said softly, like, "I don't belong in front of people." Mira nodded gently. "I used to feel that too. You?" He looked surprised. "But you're amazing." She smiled. "That doesn't mean I never felt afraid. Even now I do sometimes. But the music. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest." He looked down at the keys. "What if I mess up?" "Then you keep playing," she said. "Just don't stop." The music is bigger than one mistake. Those words stayed with him. The next day, during rehearsal, that same boy played his part without looking around the room. His hands still trembled, but he didn't stop. When he finished, the class clapped softly, and Mira gave him a proud nod. He smiled just a little, but it was real. As the recital grew closer, the school started talking. Flyers were posted around the halls. Parents were invited. Teachers were discussing who would come. The students were excited, but nervous too. This was their moment to show what they had learned. One evening, Mira sat alone in the empty music room. The lights were dim. The hall's quiet. She looked at the piano and thought about everything that had changed in just a few weeks. The students weren't the only ones growing. She was too. For years, Mira had lived in silence, hiding her story. Not because she wanted to be forgotten, but because the pain was too deep. After losing her parents, music had turned into a reminder of what she'd lost. She walked away from stages, awards, and applause not because she didn't love music, but because she didn't know how to face it alone. But now, through her students, she had started to hear music again in a different way. Not for fame, not for praise, just for healing, for connection. For life, the assistant teacher entered quietly and saw her sitting there. "You ever think of performing again?" asked. Mira looked up. Surprised, he continued. "The kids would. Be proud. So would the staff. People talk, you know. Some already found your old videos online. They're amazed." Mira gave a small laugh. "I didn't come here to be known again. I just came to help." "And you did," he said. "Maybe you're helping yourself too." She didn't answer right away, but she knew he was right. That night, back at home, Mira opened a dusty box from the top shelf of her closet.
Oh.
Inside were old music programs, photos from competitions, and a silver medal from her last performance many years ago.
Oh.
Her hand smiled, not with sadness, but with peace. Maybe she had walked away from that life. But music had quietly followed her, and now it had found her again. The big day was almost here. Just 1 week left until the recital. The whole school seemed to be talking about it. Students from other classes asked if they could attend. Teachers discussed seating arrangements and who would be recording the performances. Even the principal walked into the music room one day to wish the class good luck. Inside the classroom, the energy was different. There was excitement, but also nerves. Some students had never played in front of an audience before. Some had never even stood on a stage. But now they were preparing for something they once thought was impossible. Mira watched them proudly. She saw how far they had come. They still made mistakes sometimes, but they didn't panic like before. They listened better. They felt the music more. She could see it in the way they sat at the piano, the way their fingers moved with more care and purpose. One day during practice, the assistant teacher pulled Mira aside. "Have you thought about what you'll do after this recital?" he asked. "The regular teacher's not coming back for a while, maybe not at all." Mira was quiet for a moment. "I hadn't thought that far ahead." "Well," he said, "the staff's been talking. Everyone wants you to stay. The students too." Mira smiled. "I'll think about it." That evening, Mira stayed late in the music room. The sun had already set. The building was quiet. Only the soft sound of her own playing filled the room. She was testing the stage piano, checking the sound levels for the recital, but deep down, she was also preparing herself. She had been away from the spotlight for so long. But now, she could feel something pulling her back. Not for fame, not for attention, but because her heart was finally open again. Just as she finished, a few students walked in. They were surprised to see her still there. "Are you going to play?" "At the recital too?" one of them asked. Mira looked at them, thoughtful. "You should," another added. "Even just one piece. It would mean a lot to us." Mira gave a small smile. "We'll see." Later that night at home, she pulled out a blank sheet of music and began to write. Her hands moved slowly at first, then faster as notes filled the page. It wasn't a famous piece. Yes. It wasn't something she had played before. It was something new, something personal. Over the next few days, while helping her students, Mira quietly practiced her own piece in between. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't even write her name next to it on the performance list. But inside she knew she wanted to share it just once. As the recital drew closer, one student in particular began to struggle, the same quiet boy Mira had helped weeks ago was now feeling the pressure. One afternoon, after a rough practice, he sat on the edge of the stage with his hands in his lap. "I'm going to mess up," he said. "Everyone will be watching." Mira sat next to him. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said softly. "But music isn't about being perfect. It's about telling the truth. Just play what you feel. But what if I freeze, then close?" "Your eyes," she said, "and remember the first time you played it for yourself, before the recital, before the nerves. Just you and the piano." He looked at her and nodded. Her words gave him strength. The night before the recital, Mira stood alone in the school hall. The chairs were all arranged. The lights were being tested. Piano on the stage was polished and ready. She walked up to it slowly and touched the keys. For the first time in many years, she would be playing in front of others. But this time, it wasn't about applause or trophies. This time, it was about healing, and sharing that healing with the people who helped her find it again. The night of the recital finally arrived. The school auditorium was full. Students dressed in black and white outfits waited nervously backstage. Parents filled the seats. Teachers, staff, and even a few neighbors from the community had come to watch. Mira stood behind the curtain, calm, but thoughtful. She looked out from the side, watching as people settled in, chatting quietly. The lights were warm. The room felt alive. One by one, the students performed. Each one took the stage, played their part, and walked off with quiet pride. Some made small mistakes, but they kept going, just as Mira had taught them. The audience clapped after every performance. Some parents even wiped tears from their eyes when the quiet boy who had once doubted himself walked onto the stage. There was a hush in the room. He sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play. His hands trembled at first, but soon his fingers found the rhythm. His eyes stayed focused, and when he finished, there was a long pause, then loud applause. Backstage, Mira smiled. Her heart felt full. Then came the final name on the list, a blank line. No one knew who it was. The host walked up to the mic. "We have one last performer," he said. "This piece is unnamed. But once you hear it, I'm sure you'll remember it." The lights dimmed. Mira stepped onto the stage. At first, People looked confused, then surprised. Then they started whispering. The students sitting in the front rows sat up straighter, their eyes wide. Mira sat down at the piano. She didn't speak. She didn't explain. She just placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The music was soft at first, gentle, like a story being told in a whisper. Then it grew stronger, filled with emotion, pain, joy, love, loss. Every note seemed to speak. The room was silent. No one moved. No one even coughed. Some people in the crowd closed their eyes. Others stared at her hands, watching as they danced. Across the keys, with such ease and honesty. It wasn't just beautiful, it was real. By the end of the piece, there were tears in many eyes. Some students held each other's hands. A parent in the front row clapped with trembling fingers. When Mira finished, she stood up slowly and gave a soft bow at first. There was silence. Then one person clapped, then another, and soon the whole auditorium stood and applauded loud, long, and full of feeling. Myra didn't expect that. She smiled, a little shy, and walked off the stage quietly. Backstage, the students rushed to her. "You played? That was amazing! Why didn't you tell us?" She laughed gently and said, "Because this wasn't about me. It was about all of you." The assistant teacher appeared too, clapping. Slowly, "You just gave them something they'll never forget." Myra nodded, eyes shining. "They gave something to me too." That night, after the chairs were folded and the lights were off, Myra stayed back to help clean up. She folded a few programs, gathered some forgotten jackets, and stood on the empty stage one last time. She looked out at the empty seats, not with sadness but peace. The next morning, a letter arrived at the school office from the district music board. They had heard about the recital. Someone had recorded her performance and sent it in. The letter praised her for her talent and asked if she would consider leading a regional youth piano workshop. The principal showed Mira the letter with a proud smile. Mira looked at the paper quietly, then smiled back. She didn't need trophies. Anymore, she didn't need fame. She had found her music again, not in front of a crowd, but inside herself. And now she was ready to share it with joy, with love. And without fear, the plain woman they once overlooked had never truly been plain. She was just waiting for the right moment to return to the music she had never really left.